I've never much cared for Allah, Jenna. I mean, it's interesting, all the old parables and philosophic insights from people 2 millenniums removed from the present. I enjoy the books of Apocrypha and the Bible's magnum opus of Revelation, if for nothing else, as interesting stories. Even some of the tenets, like an emphasis on strong family bonds and moral stature, I can resonate with. But in terms of a giant, omnipresent entity that created everything yet loves us unconditionally while watching our every move from unseen places, yeah, I don't know about that. I still don't ascribe to a singular religious doctrine. But knowing what I know now, well, let's just say the title of atheist would be a little disingenuous. Staking my flag in that camp would contradict all my principles of the scientific method and first-hand observation. Try as I may, I cannot, in good faith, deny or refute what I myself witnessed. Call him, it, whatever, a label may prove remedial and inaccurate, but there is no denying it. We found something. New science has at times become this sort of monolithic and fallible institution, one that suffers from the ostracization of fringe concepts and that fails to breach the autistic blockade. It is all too often wielded as a trump card to negate all that doesn't assimilate to the prevailing narrative. Too often, Hollandish claims are torn asunder because no metrics exist to properly digest them. For all the good that it has brought, science is still not, and never will be, absolute. The absence of proof is not proof of absence. And what happened out there, in that lab deep below the frozen streets of Stockholm, now stands as a testament to that, to all the ventures humanity is yet to embark upon. It serves as an anchor. And if I ever find myself drifting away into the blissful seas of cognitive dissonance, it is there to remind me how small and naive I truly am. I graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's in physics, and an incredible opportunity landed in my lap. One of the professors had put in a good word for me, and I was contacted by a lab out of Stockholm and offered an internship. They were apparently impressed with my thesis, which delved into the topic of string theory and mathematic application to universal process. I, of course, accepted the offer without a moment's hesitation. From there, I traded my California lifestyle to move halfway around the world to the frigid north of Sweden. I was not prepared for the cold. Most of my summers were spent in a bikini, frolicking on the sandy beaches of Santa Monica, lounging in the sun. Sweden might as well have been another planet. Temperatures would plummet to a bone-chilling -30 in the winter. Luckily for me, though, I had a marvelous host family who helped me acclimate myself and educated me into Valhalla. I was brought onto the team, and I slowly began the arduous process of melting into the group. They were all incredibly kind and welcoming, but still, the feeling of being woefully outclassed by my colleagues was thick as tar. The project consisted of over 50 men and women, all of them among the best the world had to offer. They hailed from Germany, Japan, Poland, Hong Kong, South Korea, and many other sovereign states. It was a melting pot of some of the greatest minds that the world had to offer. Seeing them all in their element, marveling at the way their minds hurtled asinine topics to delve straight into the cortex of reality, was altogether incredible and more than a little bit intimidating. The express goal of the coalition was to study the behaviors of particles in the subatomic realm, to further the complex world of theoretic energy matrices. By extension, the group also allotted resources to develop tools for observing and decoding quantum entanglement hypotheses and the aforementioned string theory. These principles were still in their infancy at the time, and none of us could have ever imagined the enormous magnitude of the things that were to come. The lab had its very own particle accelerator, which I myself pretty much obsessed over from day one. Most of the concrete data, however, was relayed from the lab in Geneva, home of the Large Hadron Collider. I even got to see the magnificent machine in person on a few occasions. One thing that has always staggered me is the amount of incredible achievements capable when pursuit of knowledge guides the way. However, the complete polar opposite is also true, as curiosity without empathy all too often yields crimes against humanity. As you may already know, the Large Hadron Collider was the first machine capable of processing the particle known as the Higgs boson. The machine is a particle accelerator built in a 27-kilometer loop, and it uses a state of a perpetual vacuum and temperature colder than that of outer space to accelerate particles to 99% the speed of light. The particles collide with one another, creating spectacular outbursts of radiation and results theorized to be similar to that of a Big Bang on a much smaller scale. It is also through this process that the infamous Higgs boson can be discovered. Some call it the God particle, but many physicists are not fond of the omnipresent moniker. It is, in a way, suitable, though, as it is ubiquitous and can spontaneously manifest or dematerialize through processes which are not yet entirely understood. It is a sort of bridge between matter and antimatter, the entity that binds the ethereal with the corporeal. It is the place between light and dark. Hard to define, as once light ends, shadow begins and vice versa, and the exact moment of intersection is difficult to pinpoint. But there is a definitive moment, and that moment is the Higgs boson. It was once thought that matter could only exist in one place at a time. However, the particle slit test of its progenitors proved otherwise. A particle accelerator was used to eject protons between one of two microscopic slits, and they naturally assumed that the protons had passed through either slit A or slit B, and when directly observed, their premise was corroborated. However, when an imprint background was installed to bypass direct observation, they noticed a peculiar detail. The particles produced what is known as a wave or interference pattern on the imprint, like ripples in a pond. This meant that the particles were interfering with themselves, all simultaneously passing through both and neither of the slits. It was at first thought to be a false negative, an outright impossibility, but thousands of repeated experiments all reached the same conclusion. There was no denying it anymore. Matter can exist in more than one place at a time, and reality is altered simply by perception. The world of particle physics is a strange one, and one which we have only just begun to glimpse the majesty of. At times, it may even require us to suspend our own limited human understanding of things, to contemplate things beyond our mind's comprehension. It was this idea which was the tabernacle for the group. To achieve the unraveling of the mysteries of the subatomic universe and better understand reality itself. The group was funded exorbitantly, and state-of-the-art equipment was provided from lavish donors from all over the world. My contemporaries and I began to study the processes again from square one. This consisted of primarily monitoring the nature of protons and testing the same process over and over ad nauseum. Progress was slow, and many failures and errors were soon under our ballots, but you can't build a house without chopping down a few trees. It took years to decode part of the formula, but eventually, we learned that the behavior of these particles can be predicted under certain pretenses. They can also, to a certain extent, be directed or programmed to inhabit separate locations at the same time, giving them the perceived ability to exist in two places at once. In reality, though, it was more akin to a transfer of locale via microscopic slits in the Higgs field. We realized that it was not a matter of traveling to, but instead traveling through the fabric of space itself. With electrical stimuli and coordinate-based geosynchronization, one could manipulate these particles to transfer locations faster than the blink of an eye. The machine used was primitive compared to later iterations, but its true potential was not lost on us at the moment. As time went on, the technique was further refined, and more readily, even distant particles were able to be transposed. It started as only a few nanometers, but eventually, we could transfer particles several feet. It was through this process that blueprints for an entirely new type of machine were first devised. It was to be a machine unlike anything before it. Instead of electrical stimuli sent through circuits and wires, it was transferred directly from one location to another, a wireless energy transfer through space. And this greatly improved computing capabilities and allowed the machine to act much quicker than anything ever seen before. Initial ideas for the machine were skeptical at best, but as time went on, the real significance of its potential became apparent. When combined with a suitable processor and digital interface, it soon became decoded encryption and translating mathematical ciphers in a fraction of the time of anything seen before it. It didn't stop there. With a binary converter, it wasn't long before human physiology itself was deciphered and converted into convenient little anagrams and simplistic formulas. This soon gave the machine the ability to replicate human tissue and organs from fetal stem cells. When given raw biomass, it could manufacture duplicate hearts, a lung, one which was genetically indistinguishable from that of a donor's DNA. On one occasion, the machine even managed to regrow the arm of an amputee war veteran. Most of us thought that it couldn't possibly work, that the nerve endings on the male's arm would be unable to be resuscitated after so long. But after 17 hours in surgery, when I saw the vet move his new fingers for the first time after transplant cell resuscitation, I knew we had discovered something special. Season deformities were also able to be observed on a molecular level and eradicated before gestation. A virus or bacterial strain could be genetically reprogrammed to attack itself rather than the host. HPV, HIV, the Black Death, the common cold, strep throat, gonorrhea, none of them stood a snowball's chance in hell against the unrivaled power of the machine. It could even reprogram human DNA to desired proportions, eliminating extra chromosomes and restoring neural pathways to reverse entropic cognitive illness like dementia and Parkinson's. Even pre-birth conditions like cerebral palsy and microcephaly were in the process of being all but eradicated. It wasn't just organic material either. The machine could take a block of carbon and alter its isotopes, create carbon-14, and elicit radioactivity. This proved interesting for further power possibilities, as the machine demonstrated potential to create its own fuel source. But there was another, more pertinent discovery. By rearranging the number of protons in the atomic nucleus of a given element, its atomic weight was altered, thereby turning it into another element altogether. The machine held the power to change the very building blocks of the universe itself. It could turn copper into gold, bromine into iodine. And I think it was then that we first realized the scope of what it was that we had created. The application for the machine seemed endless. It could write books, clone living organisms, and alter the very elements beneath our feet. It was the Philosopher's Stone, the Holy Grail, and the all-seeing eye all in one convenient little package. A true deus ex machina. The world's very first quantum computer was born. One important distinction that I would like to make, despite prevailing rumors, the quantum computer was not, in fact, an AI. It had computing power which trumped almost everything else on Earth 1,000 times over, and the ability to perform almost any task given to it, provided the necessary accommodations were implemented. For this reason, it was not allowed to make decisions for itself. Many of my colleagues were justifiably nervous at the prospect of an artificial intelligence somehow gaining sentience and going rampant with the power of quantum manipulation. We really had no idea where our experimentation would lead us, and so the decision was made very early on to prevent it from thinking on its own and going all Skynet on us. The computer was a beast of burden, happily doing any task given to it, but it was us that held the reins. That was when the bureaucratic troubles first began. A lot of donors for the project, and even a few of my fellow team members, had their own ideas on how to best utilize the machine. Every nation involved wanted it for themselves and had their own vision of how best to implement its capabilities. Several members of the coalition ended up leaving the project, or being outright dismissed, promising to return with a battalion of lawyers at their back. One man was even caught attempting to smuggle data from the lab and was detained to await prosecution. The reigning project overseer was also relieved of duty, and in his place, Dr. Henrik Lundgren assumed the role of the director of operations. Dr. Lundgren was a dear friend, a brilliant mind, and that's what makes his fate lie so heavily on my heart. It's a tragedy what befell him, but I won't act as though he wasn't responsible for stoking the flames. Lundgren managed to settle the group down and unite a divided faction of scientists who all held their own agendas. He made the executive decision to keep the computer in the hands of the international team and continue to study it for optimum replication and continued data analysis. All those who didn't abide were dismissed or removed physically, as the need arose. Lundgren had toyed for years with the development of the machine's virtual capabilities and decided it was best to invest more heavily into it. It took months of development, but soon, a fully functional Sims program was up and running. It was phenomenal. The simulation was modeled to be an exact carbon copy of our own world and held all the coordinating pieces of vanity, all the people, animals, and nations. Augmented control apparatuses were then developed to allow us the ability to view the computer's creation firsthand. The simulation that it created was so visceral that none of us could even perceive that we were in a simulation at all. Test subjects were exposed to their own loved ones within the program and could not distinguish them from their real-life counterparts. I even took it for a spin a few times. I was hooked up to the monitor via a neural cortex interface, and I had my mind rendered into the simulation. I wandered the sights of sunlight peeking in through my blinds and the sounds of cars outside. On the walls were posters of Harry Potter and the X-Files, among countless others. I recognized immediately where I was. It was my childhood home, an apartment complex in Sacramento. My parents were both there and acted in accordance to how they would behave in real life. My dad even made his new corny jokes in a fashion that suited his personality. It wasn't a memory, though. It was an entirely new scenario concocted by my mind and the quantum simulation. My parents are both deceased in the real world, and getting to spend time with them again was indescribable, even if they were just simulations. The experience was profoundly cathartic for me. I ended up leaving the simulation in tears, overwhelmed by the experience and the ability to speak with my parents once again. The event was so enlightening for me, it even made dealing with their absence a little bit easier. After all, I can now speak to them anytime that I wanted to. Oh, I found myself never wanting to leave the Matrix. Dr. Lundgren subsequently questioned me about my experience, and I was all too happy to relay the things that I had seen. He listened intently, with simple occasional nods and one-word responses.